This week, the Pope is on retreat, but we have details on a diplomatic misunderstanding, a new doctor of the Church, and a look ahead at the next papal encyclical. Hello and welcome to this edition of Vatican Connections. Now, the Pope and the Roman Curia are on retreat this week, but there's still a lot going on. Not a lot of people have heard of Saint Gregory of Narek. He is a 10th century Armenian monk and poet. This week, Pope Francis named him a Doctor of the Church. Now, Saint Gregory was born around the year 950, somewhere around the city of Narek. He came from a long line of scholars and entered monastic life at a very early age. He became a priest at the age of 25 and lived most of his life in the monastery of Narek. His first published writing was a commentary on Song of Songs. Now, although St. Gregory had qualms about his commentary, it actually became famous for its clarity of thought, language, and theological presentation. He went on to write letters, reflections, and prayers that are included in the Divine Liturgy still used in Armenian churches today. Pope Francis surprised the faithful who gathered to pray the Angelus with him on Sunday. After leading the prayer, the Pope had a team of helpers give out books to the people in the square. The book was called Safeguard Your Heart, and it contains reflections on Jesus' teachings. Now, the team handing out the booklets actually included many of the homeless people who live around the Vatican. What was a private papal email has caused a bit of a diplomatic issue between the Holy See and Mexico. In a private informal email to his friend Gustavo Vera, who is a social activist and city councilor in Buenos Aires involved in the fight against human and drug trafficking, the Pope, in that exchange, discussed the work being done to counter drug trafficking in Argentina. Now, both expressed the hope that some significant progress can be made before the situation in Argentina becomes like Mexico. They actually used the word Mexicanized. The Pope said, "Hopefully we're in time to avoid Mexicanization." Now, it's no secret that in some regions of Mexico, drug trafficking is so entrenched and the traffickers are so powerful, the local police and governments are having a really hard time battling the drug cartels. Vera published the emails on his association's webpage, and the Mexican government took offense. The country's ambassador to the Holy See sent an official note to the Vatican's Secretary of State saying the Pope was stigmatizing Mexico. The Vatican immediately sent Mexico's ambassador a note emphasizing that the Pope was quoting a phrase used by someone else in a private conversation, and that the Pope only intended to emphasize the seriousness of the phenomenon of drug trafficking that affects Mexico and other Latin American countries. Finally, we know that Pope Francis is working on an encyclical about the environment. CNS actually spoke to one Vatican watcher who shed some light on why the Pope is writing this encyclical.
What he's trying to do, and this is straight out of Catholic social teaching, is to put human beings, make the economy serve human beings rather than the other way around. Ecology is important in this because I think devastation of the planet, expressed in rapid climate change, is a symptom of a system which is just not functioning. So I think what you're going to get here is he's going to be saying to the world, look, you care about creation, you care about our planet, you've got to realize we need an economy that actually cares for the planet and cares for human beings. And I think he's going to be bringing together not only the idea of stewardship of creation, but also human ecology. So that how we relate to each other is also going to be, I think, in this encyclical. It was Pope Benedict, of course, who first used this expression, human ecology. But Pope Francis is really taking it out, taking it on the road. What he believes is that our laws and our culture, the view of marriage, is no longer rooted in human ecology. It's no longer rooted in a proper anthropology. here is a Pope who's passionate about marriage. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires produced a very, very powerful condemnation of the bill to the law, as it turned out, to introduce same-sex marriage in Argentina. And in a private letter, it was private, but it was later leaked, he spoke about it as being, a matter of the devil. This is a temptation, because under the guise of civil rights and equality, which of course are good things, in fact what was being proposed here was the destruction of marriage as it's rooted in that divine anthropological reality. So he's saying, look, if you mess around with the divine design for creation, you're going to end up with climate change and devastation of the planet. If you mess around too much with, if you like, the divine ecology for human beings, you end up with other distortions and other consequences.
We've been bringing you a look over the last few weeks at young Catholics and their relationship with the Pope. This week we have the next installment on that series. We're looking at the Pope's unique style and how that has helped build a relationship with young Catholics.
Pope's throne, it's just white. It's not on a platform, it's not raised, it's not elevated. It's just a simple, large chair, just like anyone else would sit in.
I don't think it's a commentary on what past popes have done. I think it's just that's his style. I mean, as Archbishop in Argentina, he just lived in a single room apartment. So, I mean, we have to consider his background. But also, I think what he wants too is to really live in a community with his fellow priests, to eat with them, to get to know his church and his flock.
Now you see it, the Pope Francis doesn't live in the palace, he lives in his own humble area, and by showing the humility, he invites others to be humble like him.
I would argue that it is actually less simple to live in the guest house Santa Marta as he does, because it creates, the Vatican is laid out in a certain way. It's not a huge city, okay? It's a tiny city. And it's led in a certain way, and that means that certain structures they work the way they work. The police has a certain route, the Swiss Guard have certain gates, and so forth. If you move somewhere else, even if it's a guest house, then it creates a whole set of practical problems that at the end don't facilitate work for everybody else. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that the real simplicity does not necessarily have to be expressed in the outward form. The simplest way would just to do what everybody else did, which is live in the papal palace.
I think the visual changes that he did make was a big step to show people that, this is what the church is going to look like going forward. This is how I'm going to make it open. I'm not sure if these specific things were intended to do that, but it definitely had that result. It definitely elicited a reaction out of people all over the world saying, wow, this is different. This is something I haven't seen before.
I do think he wants to inspire us to also not get comfortable in luxurious lifestyles, to suffer a bit, to make small sacrifices as well. So I think that's what he's trying to prompt us to think.
It's not about how you look or appear. It's not about what's on the surface. It's about what kind of message you're sending as a pope, as the Catholic Church, as the Word of God. It's about the content. It's not about what you just see visually. And you don't need to be ornamented to send the message of God.
He sometimes himself is confounded how much people read into stuff that he does. Okay, and he says, that's not at all what I wanted. And so that he changed his throne, he didn't do that out of a reaction to previous popes, or to future popes for that matter, but he did it because he just likes that throne more. Okay, and he said that on multiple occasions. I like to do this that way.
I think it's a lot less intimidating You know, not that like the throne before was meant to be intimidating, but I think as a young person, as maybe other people that might not be completely sure of their faith, I know like among a lot of the youth there is this kind of like, you're going through a time of uncertainty, you're not necessarily sure of yourself, let alone what you believe in. And I think a church that sends a message of openness and Pope Francis sitting down and on the same level as you and having a conversation with you rather than preaching to you would much better send a message to young people. I think they're much more receptive to that kind of interaction.
I think his relationships with the people in terms of catching baseball, drinking Argentinian tea, I think that's a way of bringing the holiness and the importance of the papacy to the people. I don't think it diminishes his importance at all. I think it actually makes it more accessible.
I feel Pope Francis definitely has a great dynamic with the audience. People love seeing him, and you see the plaza get filled with people every Wednesday without fail because they really want to see him, they want to interact with him. And the great thing about Pope Francis is that he does the interactions. He catches baseballs, he catches rosaries, he puts hats of other people and then gives them back. And it's all these little details, these little actions that make him an approachable Pope.
I was speaking, to some friends of mine at Loyola, and they were saying, I haven't been to church in like 10 years, but Francis kind of makes me want to go to church now. Like I want to be like Catholic again, because they were so in favor of his policies, and they think that he was a very radical Pope, and his policies of not so much focusing on doctrine but more on like the poor, and just getting back to the roots of what Christianity really should be about.
By him just interacting and waving, inviting people up on the Pope-mobile, I think those things are really attractive to the youth because they see that he's open and willing to engage with them.
I think he certainly has gotten a lot of media attention just because he's so different than his predecessors. The way in which he interacts with people is different. The way in which he sends his messages are different. Initially, he was this sort of spectacle of like, wow, like this is our new Pope, like this is so different than what maybe we were expecting.
I think he's more aware than other popes of his effect. John Paul II was an actor. He somewhat knew it, but he made it part of the form. Okay, Benedict wasn't aware of it at all, but he took great care in doing things right. He would read other languages before the general audiences. He would try to pronounce things beforehand. Pope Francis goes more out of an impulse. At the same time with an awareness of what he kind of affects in the media, what kind of effect he has in the media, and I think that's okay.
It is nice to see little things like him catching a baseball and catching a rosary, but I think that the issues that really should get on the news is the message that he's trying to convey. For example, the day he caught the baseball, after that he started talking about the gospel, and it was a great message. That's what should have made the news. Unfortunately, people go more with the actions rather than with what he's trying to tell us.
Yes, it does make headlines, and sometimes that's all it does. But at the same time, it's getting the Vicar of Christ on the front of a newspaper, and that speaks volumes regardless of why he's there.
I don't think it takes away from his value as the Pope at all. I think he's really just trying to live out Christ's example and really put the faith into practice for us. So simple things like catching a baseball, catching rosaries, or whatever, really, I think it just makes us, relate to him.
Time to take a look now at the papal agenda for this week. The bishops from Ukraine met with Pope Francis at the end of their ad limina visit. Metropolitan Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk told reporters before that meeting that they intended to tell the Pope the truth about the situation in their country. He said they felt the need to make it understood clearly that the conflict is not a civil war, but an act of aggression by their neighbors. Pope Francis gave the bishops the text of a speech he would have made to them. In that speech, the Pope cautioned the bishops not to politicize their role as spiritual leaders. He said while they have a right as citizens to express their thoughts for the future, they cannot promote any concrete political actions. He urged them to focus on the humanitarian aspect of the conflict and to continue to promote peace and justice. Now, Archbishop Shevchuk later told reporters he invited the Pope to visit Ukraine. He said the Pope's presence could help bring peace. The Archbishop also said Pope Francis listened to the bishops with a paternal heart, asking them how Ukrainians are facing the situation. Before going away on retreat, Pope Francis met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now, they met privately for 40 minutes. A standard visit between leaders like this at the Vatican usually lasts between 15 and 20 minutes, so the length of this visit indicates that some serious talk may have happened behind closed doors. Merkel herself told German media the meeting was enriching and covered a vast range of topics, including poverty, the role of women in developing nations, and the agenda for the upcoming Group of 7 economic meeting, which is being hosted by Germany in June. According to Merkel, they also discussed the conflict in eastern Ukraine, with the Pope giving her encouragement to proceed, quote, decidedly and determinedly. Now, when it came to the gift exchange, the Pope gave the German leader a medal depicting St. Martin giving his coat to the needy, and Merkel gave the Pope a donation to help children affected by conflicts in the Middle East. On Sunday afternoon, Pope Francis boarded a bus with members of the Roman Curia. They drove to a retreat house in Aricia, which is a small hillside town outside of Rome, for a week of spiritual exercises. The exercises are being led by Carmelite priest Father Bruno Secondin. The theme for the week is Servants and Prophets of the Living God.
Elijah is a prophet who walks, who knows, who lives his mission on the frontier. He goes as far as Sinai. He goes to Lebanon. So he's a prophet who journeys. It seems very appropriate to me, and I've heard it said recently, it's very appropriate for this time and this pontificate. The figure of a prophet who, well, is a great prophet, but lives his mission moving around, dealing with the unexpected here and there, living an experience of God, recalling the covenant, the faithfulness of God. So he seemed to me a very interesting figure, and I thought of building this retreat around him.
Quindi mi sembrava una figura molto interessante e ho pensato di costruire attorno a lui questo. Partire
We start with leaving our own village, enter into the depths of our own existence, meet with God, and even an encounter with the things that are a false image of the religious experience, faith, in order to be transformed by a God who is very different from the idea we've got in our heads, who is somewhere other than our own so-called villages, in order to purify from deep within that which we live and have lived and rediscover the sense of belonging to Him. When Elijah was taken into heaven, he drops his cloak, which was a piece of clothing typical of Elijah, a classic symbol. His disciple, Elisha, picks it up and goes to meet the rest of the group. And they recognize right away the spirit of the prophet Elijah is upon him. That's where we get the image of picking up the prophet's cloak. His cloak cannot be left to fall. We must pick it up, embark on new paths in a spirit of fraternity. These images come very easily from the biblical text. So this is an attempt to, altogether, put ourselves before the truth of who we are, of God, or the challenge of injustice, manipulation, and the struggles of the poor, and then return to building new paths for fraternity.
Let's take a look at who has a new job this week. Pope Francis appointed 3 bishops in Brazil this week. Luz, Tres Lagoas, and Campo Grande have new bishops. Well, one has an auxiliary. Father José Aristeo Vieira became Bishop of Luz. Father Luis Gonçalves Knupp becomes Bishop of Tres Lagoas, and Father Janos Danecki will be the new auxiliary in Campo Grande. Now, similarly, 3 bishops resigned in the Dominican Republic, and successors have been appointed for all 3 all at once. The bishops of Santiago de los Caballeros, La Vega, and Barahona resigned. Bishop Freddy Antonio de Jesus Breton Martinez becomes Bishop of Santiago de los Caballeros. Father Andrés Napoleon Romero Cardenas becomes Bishop of Barahona, and Father Hector Rafael Rodriguez becomes Bishop of La Vega. Recently, Cardinal Raymond Burke was appointed patron of the Sovereign Order of the Knights of Malta, and he spoke to CNS about what that job entails.
The Cardinal Patron is a personal representative of the Holy Father to the Knights of Malta. He does not participate directly in their governance, and yet is very close to the Grand Master and to the other leaders in the order, and assisting them to carry out their service in the most Catholic manner possible. I have my duties with the Sovereign Military Order, Malta, but at the same time I continue to be a bishop and a cardinal, and I have a responsibility to continue to teach both through writing and speaking and whatever other means are available. So I'm continuing that work. Obviously, it has to be coordinated with my primary responsibility to the Sovereign Military Order, but at the same time I have to say that the two things go rather well together, because this work of defending the faith in our time and caring for the poor, that is the charism of the Knights of Malta, is obviously also what I'm most trying to do as a bishop and as a cardinal. In fact, I am working on a book of meditations on the essential aspects of the Church's teaching on the Holy Priesthood, and then obviously on how that grace of holy orders is lived in the priestly life. And I do other writing in canon law, give other presentations, also some things in sacred liturgy, which is another particular interest of mine.
Vatican Connections is interactive. We answer your questions and explain things you want to know. You can reach us on Twitter @VatiConnections or by email at info@saltandlighttv.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions during this part of our show. Well, that's it for this edition of Vatican Connections. Join us again next week for more of what's going on inside Vatican walls. And don't forget, as always, you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook, or check our blog for regular updates, and of course, watch us on demand on Roku. From everyone here, thanks for watching. See you next time.